Her perfume wasn't for me. They say every speakeasy invents its own kind of darkness. Ours hides behind a false bookcase in a used bookstore and smells like orange peels and the clean part of trouble. I work the bar 3 nights a week, coaxing the room from whispers to laughter and then back again. People come because candlelight tells better lies than daylight, and because the blue velvet booth under the fire escape window makes bad ideas look cinematic. Lena, my wife, used to love that booth. She'd tuck her legs up, order a rye with honey, and let her wrist brush mine when I set the glass down. She wore a light, citrus perfume that evaporated as quickly as her reasons for staying late with me after closing. Somewhere along the way she moved her shifts to client dinners and industry nights, calendar blocks that ate the evenings we once lived in. When you share a life with someone who speaks fluent schedule, you start hearing time zones in their voice. The first clue didn't arrive as drama. It was folded into something domestic and small, a silk scarf knotted around the strap of her tote. Lena doesn't wear silk. She likes sharp lines and matte fabrics with pockets big enough for phones, keys, and excuses. The scarf was deep blue with tiny bronze bees stitched along the border, the sort of accessory you buy when you want conversation to notice you. It smelled warm and expensive, jasmine amber, a whisper of smoke. "You're glowing," I said, tying her tote closed before she rushed out again. "New client." "Maybe," she said, not looking at me. "Please don't wait up, it could go late." I didn't have the energy to ask what it was. I kissed her neck where the perfume had settled and felt a question bloom in the back of my throat and refused to travel. At the bar that night, a phone buzzed near the espresso machine. Not mine, not the server's. I flipped it over, expecting a drunk's lock screen, a dog, a beach, some borrowed sunshine. What I found instead was a message thread open to a number I didn't recognize. The phone wasn't locked, because even modern sins are sometimes lazy, and the top message was a photo taken outside a restaurant I knew too well. The Lantern Room. Their chef's table has a curtain and a reputation. In the photo, Lena stood beside a man with his hand low on her back. I knew him. Everyone in our neighborhood knows Matteo, the married chef whose pasta makes critics giggle and whose dimples write their own reviews. In the picture, the scarf hung from Lena's neck like a flag of a country I'd never been invited to visit. Another message followed, as if the sender could feel my pulse from wherever she was watching. "Are you the husband, Aaron? Tell me if we're allies." The name on the thread said Sierra. The next line carried a time and a place. "Orchid Deck, midnight. 3 floors up across from Lantern. It's private." I scanned the room to see who might be monitoring me. Faces slid past, couples holding hands shaped like secrets, a pair of tourists who thought prohibition could be reenacted, a woman in a red blazer rehearsing her refusal to forgive someone. No one looked like a Sierra. No one looked like anyone but themselves, which is the trick of candlelight. "You okay?" Jess, my server, asked, hovering with the checkbook and the kind of eyes that have read too many men. "Someone left a phone," I lied. "I'll get it to the desk." By midnight, the bookstore upstairs had gone mute. I slipped out the alley door, crossed the wet street, and found the service stairs that led to the Orchid Deck, a greenhouse structured out of glass and stubbornness, maintained by the building's night manager because her heart needed something that sprang back when touched. Vines climbed metal ribs, pots crowded benches like gossip. The city was just a rumor beyond the panes. She was waiting beside a tray of orchids with names like opera arias. Sierra. Her coat was the kind that makes rain reconsider its plan. She held herself the way you hold a glass you're not done with but don't trust someone else to carry. Dark hair in a low twist. No ring. A small scar near her temple that looked like punctuation. "Is this you?" she said, showing me the photo again on her own phone. "It's her," I said, "and him." She nodded once. "He thinks I don't know the difference between work and rehearsal. I'm Sierra. We live 3 blocks apart and apparently in parallel universes." "How did you find me?" "He texts from the Lantern's back office Wi-Fi," she said, almost bored with the mechanics. "It pings the bookstore's free network because they share a wall. I asked a guy at the comic shop for a name attached to the network key. He said Aaron pours the kind of drink people confess to. You were easy to locate after that." "So you spy and you network," I said, and it wasn't unkind. "I document," she said. "There's a difference. You want to watch this burn in private or in public." In the glass, a tree's reflection was trying to climb the ceiling. I closed my eyes and saw the blue scarf moving at the edge of a curtain. "Not public," I said. "I don't want bystanders, but I don't want to be lied to in hallways anymore." She stepped closer, not invading, calibrating. "There's an industry masquerade at the Lantern on Thursday, masks because the theme committee ran out of ideas. Mateo is giddy about it. Your wife RSVP'd as +1. If we go, we can walk where they walk, and when we're ready, we take off our masks and tell the truth. No shouting, no spectacle, just light." The word "we" did strange good things to my posture. "I don't own a mask." "I do," she said. "Two, in fact. He bought me choices he didn't intend me to wear." For a moment the greenhouse hummed with our shared silence. I could feel heat gathering in my chest, not rage but that more dangerous fuel, clarity. "Okay," I said. "We do it your way, but no theater after, no revenge texts, just decisions." "Just decisions," she echoed, and gave me a measuring smile that landed low in my stomach. In the days that followed, we traded evidence because evidence anesthetizes feeling. She sent me blurred screenshots, Mateo's calendar blocked as wine study, a receipt for a perfume I could now identify by its ache. I sent her nothing because Lena kept her carelessness in the cloud, not on paper. The only thing I offered was a memory, shamefully sharp. How Lena had started turning her phone face down on our table, claiming it helped her listen. It did, to someone else. We met twice more before Thursday. Once in the daylight of a cafe where the tables were painted the color of hope, and once back on the orchid deck when the moon practiced being generous. The cafe meeting was all logistics, arrival times, which entrance, the way we'd drift apart once inside so no one would read our alliance too soon. The deck meeting was not logistics. "You don't look like a man who shouts," Sierra said, fingers worrying the seam of her glove. "I mix quietly and I leave loudly," I said, "most of the time." She laughed, small and warm. "I used to love masquerades. The permission they give, be anyone for 3 hours. Now I think the bravest thing is to look like yourself and be okay with it." "Who are you when you're not following a breadcrumb trail?" I asked. "An architect," she said. "I draw rooms with generous corners. I like buildings that teach the wind to behave. I like when a door surprises you by being lighter than it looks." "Do you design those kinds of doors for people?" I asked, testing our proximity. Her smile tilted. "Sometimes if they ask." The night pressed its hand along my spine. "I'm asking," I said, and there it was, my treason against the past, spoken aloud and clean. She touched my wrist, just her fingertips, the way you confirm an elevator has actually arrived. My pulse did the thing it used to do at the beginning of my marriage. Speed toward a future without checking for roadwork. We stepped, without agreement but in full consent, into a slow sway among the leaves. No music, just the quiet crackle of 1,000 green decisions. When she lifted her face, I kissed her the way a person opens a window, carefully, grateful for air. It was soft, precise, and not a debt to anyone else. We stopped before the world could flip its sign to closed, both breathing as if we'd remembered how. Thursday, she said, voice low. We earn whatever happens after. I want to be honest out loud, I said. Then let's build a room for it, she answered and squeezed my hand. The masquerade smelled like a department store's best idea of mystery. Masks in lacquer and lace. Soft lighting that made responsible people reckless. Servers glided with trays of oysters as if oxygen were optional. The lantern's back room spread like a pocket knife. Quiet corridors, the chef's table behind its curtain, a private stair leading to a balcony that looked born for overheard confessions. Sierra wore a black dress with a neckline that had studied architecture. Her mask was silver filigree that turned her eyes into grammar marks you were afraid to misuse. Mine was simple, Matt. We entered separately, the way professionals do, and followed the invisible map all four of us had been drawing for weeks. Lena arrived late because punctuation is part of her brand. The scarf had become a belt now, a blue line around a dress that invited handholds. Mateo greeted her with his mouth hugged close to her ear, a gesture rehearsed enough to be efficient. I stood at the bar where the light forgives most things and watched my marriage enter a room where it didn't belong. Sierra drifted near, as if considering canapes. Our shoulders angled like parentheses around the same sentence. Now, I whispered. She took a breath. Now, she said. We didn't pounce. We orbited, waiting for them to slip behind the chef's curtain. They did, a few minutes before the band switched to a slower tempo, as if someone had scheduled desire. The curtain had a small gap near the floor that showed ankles and cruelty. I could hear the sound of poured wine, the civil murmur of people who have already decided on their next wrong thing. The maitre d' knew me. I'd covered for his host on a snow night when the city iced over its bad habits. I lifted a finger, just one. He swallowed, nodded once, and stood aside. We stepped in. The world went bright. They weren't sprawled or disheveled. They were simply too close. Lena's hand rested low on Mateo's chest where his apron would have been if he were honest. She turned and saw my face before she saw the mask in my hand, and I watched her rearrange from flirtation to strategy. The human body is an incredible machine. It can pivot from pleasure to defense in a single exhale. Aaron, she started, and then stopped because there was no good next word. Hi, I said, my voice boring into calm because trembling would have given the room to them. I brought your scarf. Sierra set the blue silk gently on the corner of the table, as one might place a flower on a grave not to decorate but to acknowledge. Mateo tried on indignation and found the sleeves too long. This is private, he said, which made me hate him in a way that felt juvenile and pure. Exactly, Sierra said, which is why we're leaving after the truth. Lena's eyes searched my face like she'd lost something there. We were going to tell you, she said, a sentence that has never been true in the history of people. Tell me what? I asked. That your calendar and your mouth don't collaborate. Her mouth did a small, brave quiver and then went still. I'm sorry, she said, and again I recognized the art of my wife. Apologies she could hang like paintings, lovely from across the room. You're not sorry, Sierra said, gentle but steel-lined. You're caught, there's a difference. Mateo shifted, reaching for the wine as if to toast his way out of a headline. Maybe we can be adults about this, he began, and Sierra almost laughed. She had the kind of laugh that could sand the paint right off pretense. We are, she said. We're not shouting, we're not humiliating anyone. We simply turned on the light. I looked at Lena. The memory reel in my ribcage slowed. The early nights when we taught each other our breathing. the Sunday market where she tried on hats and didn't buy any because she wanted to remain herself. The first time she said she liked the way I poured water into a glass. All of it true. All of it unable to cancel the new truth standing in front of me wearing silk and courage borrowed from someone else. "We're done," I said, almost quietly enough not to hear. "I'll email you about the apartment. Let's not break anything we can carry." Sierra placed a card on the table, her lawyer, I guessed, or her future, then took my hand, not as theater but as gravity. We left them in the good lighting they'd earned. Outside, the night had decided on rain. It slicked the street and gave back the city in reflection. We walked under Sierra's umbrella, shoulder to shoulder, the way people do when a new shape presents itself and you're careful not to breathe too hard in case it vanishes. "You were very gentle," she said when we reached the bookstore, awning. "Anger is expensive," I said, "and I'm saving." "Saving for what?" "For a room with generous corners," I said, and felt the joke warm us both. We took the back stair to the speakeasy. The room was between sets. The pianist wiped his hands on a napkin like he'd just been given news that matters. I flicked on the lamp at the end of the bar that always makes people look like endings and beginnings at the same time. Sierra slid onto the velvet stool and watched me build her a drink without asking what she wanted. "Sweet Bright, no apologies," I said. She sipped and closed her eyes like she'd gotten away with something and wanted to get away with it again. When she opened them, I saw a softness I recognized from old photographs of myself. "We didn't make a mess," she said, as if that fact needed saying to become true. "We moved the furniture," I said. "Sometimes that's all a mess is." Our hands found each other on the bar. Not greedy, not performative, just the mistake-free geometry of fingers that had been waiting for permission. I traced the small scar near her temple with my gaze until she smiled at me for seeing the thing she never highlights. She leaned in then and kissed me again, differently. Less caution, more answer. Heat filtered behind my sternum and drifted through my arms, a tide taking inventory. It was erotic the way a good secret is erotic, not in what it exposes, but in what it promises to hold. We didn't go upstairs or into a corner. We stayed right there in the honest light and let our foreheads rest together until the world remembered its tempo. The pianist started again, something slow with backbone. The room breathed out. "Tomorrow," she said when she finally stepped back, "breakfast instead of masquerades." "Tomorrow," I said, "no masks." When the bar closed, I walked home beneath a sky that had wrung itself out and decided to forgive us. In the apartment, Lena's blue scarf lay on the dining chair where she'd abandoned it earlier. I draped it over the back like a souvenir I wasn't keeping. On the fridge, she'd left a note, "We'll talk like humans." There were no hearts, no exclamation points, no attempts at style. Just ink. Just the first draft of an ending. I slept on the couch and dreamed of rooms with windows that opened easily. In the morning, I made coffee and sent the email I'd written in my head on the walk home. Polite, practical, final. Then I showered the masquerade off me and walked to the river, where the city was busy being beautiful for people who needed something obvious. Sierra was there, seated on a bench that had sprouted from the concrete like it owed someone money. She was reading a dog-eared book, her coat unbuttoned to let in the possibility of warmth. "Architect," I said by way of greeting. "Bartender," she answered, and patted the space beside her. We didn't talk much. We sat and let the light find us. Our knees touched like an agreement. When she laced her fingers through mine, a small, electric thing ran along my arm, then calmed, then settled somewhere trustworthy. "I don't want to be the opposite of what just hurt us," she said. "I want to be something else on purpose." "Me too," I said. "I want to want without rehearsing." We watched a dog lose and find a tennis ball, a jogger practice forgiving his lungs, a couple argue as if love were a math problem they could solve by changing variables. Somewhere behind us, the city opened its doors again. Somewhere ahead, the night was already casting itself. Between those two pressures we sat, and it felt startlingly adult. I tell people the speakeasy's darkness is flattering, and it is. But daylight tells a different truth, the kind that doesn't need a theme or a password. In that untheatrical light, Sierra turned her face toward mine and kissed me like a person who knows her own map and is choosing to share it. It was the sexiest thing I could imagine. Not a performance, not a cover for a lie, just two people, unmasked, deciding to learn each other's pace. When we finally stood and walked toward breakfast, there was no curtain to part, no room to sneak into. Only doors that surprised us by being lighter than they looked, and a city that, for once, didn't ask us to pretend.